What's going on, everybody? Max and Trev here with BuzzTox, talking episode 8.
Hello.
Hey, what's going on, man?
Hey, Trev.
Hey, Max. Back at it again.
Back at it again. I'm super excited. Let's get right into it. No bullshit. Right into the breakdown.
No bullshit.
So we start off with Bernard, and Ford brings Bernard back online. And Bernard is extremely upset over killing Teresa. And Ford really finds his emotions remarkable. And he goes into what the emotions used to be. They used to be primary colors, angry, sad. But now it's a mixture of all the possible shades, which means that Bernard can reach a whole range of emotions that are pretty much equal to humans. But then Ford also goes into a bit of the backstory and says that none of the engineers wanted to pursue this level of emotion, so he ended up creating Bernard.
Yeah.
So I think, this continues to speak on Ford's motives, his pursuit of realism.
Yeah, I believe that Bernard was the guinea pig for this side of it. Because I really, truly do think now Bernard is in the form of Arnold.
Yeah, and I think throughout the episode we really see a camaraderie between Ford and Bernard. Ford almost has a certain level of respect or appreciation for Bernard, and he treats him like a friend in certain situations.
Yes.
And I think their true motives is they both want to approach full conscious hosts, but I think Ford loves that control and that godlike feeling, whereas Arnold wanted them to be their own specimen. He wanted them to be free.
Yes. So it's kind of biblical in a sense, where Ford is sort of the Old Testament God keeping Adam and Eve inside the Garden of Eden, whereas Bernard is sort of the snake whispering secrets to get out. But evil versus good, role reversal in a sense.
Yeah, and it even proves this further when, Ford says death is a small price to pay for the dominion I should require. So he is seeking control.
Yeah.
But it already seems like he has a lot of control. But in this statement, he's saying the dominion I should require, which means that he's looking for even more power.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a question to what level of power he wants. Does he want the money men out? Which would make sense. So he replaces them with hosts, so then he's technically running his own empire?
See, I don't know how far off it goes the chain, because it's they could easily just swoop in and take it out in a sense, like a hostile takeover, but there is something holding them back, and that's why they have to pussyfoot around them, and that's why they sent Charlotte in. So I don't know how to get into. I can't get my mind into what Ford's hiding. It's been the ongoing theme with me, and he is now the biggest puzzle in my mind.
I feel like Ford is a lot more straightforward than we think. I think he does want control, but he does appreciate the hosts for who they are. And that was really the slight difference between him and Bernard. Bernard wanted their freedom, and Ford wants control. And Ford seems like he's in a lot of control already, but the sense that he wants even more makes it scary. So I'm wondering, what length is he going to go to get greater control? So I don't know. We did see him printing something in his little lair. We know it's not Teresa. It could be Elsie, or maybe it's just some generic host. We never know.
Yeah, it could just be him working on his storylines, and he has custom hosts he's working on.
Yeah, and that's another way he gains control, by building these hosts that cannot be monitored by the board.
Yes, and he's using new tech. It's not like these old Arnold models kicking around.
Yeah, and his head programmer is also a host, so he's using these hosts, his creation, to give him further control. So yes. I just feel like the next step is to further produce hosts into certain positions that allow him to maneuver in a certain way to get the dominion he requires.
Yeah, but the dominion he requires is a quote from Frankenstein, the novel. So I wonder if it's double meaning in a sense, almost like he feels guilty for creating a monster. And now sort of he's trying to keep it at bay from these people. So he seems evil in a way of the things that he's had to do. But maybe he's had to go this far to keep this technology away from people that are going to use it for really bad things.
Yeah, most definitely that too. I think Ford is a saint in that sense. I think he realizes the dangers in this technology can be used for many different things, and it is safer under his control. And I think he truly believes that.
Yeah.
And I like that you're older than me too, because you can point out all of these little like Frankenstein book. Like that's not my generation, so I'm glad you can look into that older stuff.
Frankenstein was a big one in school for us.
I hated Frankenstein. He scared the shit out of me.
Oh, not the monster from Frankenstein?
Oh yeah. The monster actually isn't Frankenstein.
No, Frankenstein's the old doctor.
Fuck, we're way off topic.
So
Bernard actually refuses to help Ford. And he gets like pissed. He like throws a chair. Excellent acting by Jeffrey Wright. And I think Ford really enjoys these moments with Bernard where he knows that he is a host. However, he is sentient. So it's this interesting thing that Ford likes to watch. But then he ends up freezing him. And, you know, he says that Arnold also felt this way. He felt the way you did. And Ford said he couldn't stop me either. So by that statement, it does suggest that Ford had a hand to play in Arnold's death.
Yeah. Oh, big time. It seemed like there was a bit of a clash of ideology when it came to these things. Because maybe they started off as, oh, yeah, we can create these really ultra-realistic robots. But then something happened that it went to 11 for one of them, at least. And he was like, no, these things aren't just robots. They're sentient things.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, I don't think that Ford would have killed Arnold. I think that they were actually, like, good friends.
Yeah.
But they did have a difference in ideologies, like you said. But I think, you know, he couldn't stop Ford in the sense because of possibly, you know, personalities. Ford, I would see, as more of a leader. He brought in the money men that wasn't in Arnold's control. And because the money men were on Ford's side, he naturally could take control. And that would leave Arnold with no other situation than to build this insider maze.
Yeah.
And do this stunt that he pulled inside the park. So I feel like he was backed into a corner where the only thing he could do is be sneaky.
Yeah.
And another thing, you know, Bernard is so much like Arnold. You know, and there's so much complaining. Ford throughout the whole season has complained about Arnold and how he lost his way and how he doesn't understand that. So I find it interesting how he created his programmer in line with the exact same trait that he hated with Arnold.
What if he had no choice? That's what I'm getting at. I'm saying that he at this scene he sort of flips out and says very Arnold things, but he stops him before he can continue. Almost like he even says like Arnold thought the same way too. So maybe there was some sort of half upload of consciousness that Ford has desperately tried to bury over the years, and it always boils to the surface, leaving Ford to always have to do patches and upgrades and memory wipes and all these same things over and over again. The number one thing that makes me think Bernard is Arnold incarnate is that we saw the scene of him talking to Dolores. Because before I thought that was him sort of looking into what was going on. Now I think that's prior, because we know it's the same room that we see the murder happen in, and this was his relationship with Dolores beforehand. That's how he told her about the maze, and that's why she got all broken bad way back when. And that it set her up to always try and get off this loop.
Yeah, and Ford is a really nostalgic guy, so I think, you know, I just find it so interesting how putting the trait of Arnold that Ford despised, which is kind of empathy, I guess, a high level of empathy, which he felt for these hosts, and putting that into Bernard, who is in a sense a recreation of Arnold, to me is even stronger now because Bernard is a host himself. So I feel like that action could really bite Ford in the ass.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All of Ford's actions now are going to bite him in the ass because it's sentience is coming through now.
Yeah, and that's something he obviously can't control, and we see that later in the episode. But Ford actually gets Bernard to erase all of the evidence of Teresa's murder.
Yeah.
And then in return, Ford promises Bernard that he'll erase his mind with his relationship with Teresa, and we see Bernard kind of just trashing everything. He like nukes the fuck out of those letters.
Everything.
It just like disintegrates.
Yeah, I guess it's like a infirmary for hosts if they need to burn something out.
Yeah, and then he ends up making her invisible on the map and like doing all these crazy things.
Did I say infirmary? I think that's like a hospital. I meant like crematorium, where you would cremate someone.
Yeah, exactly. But I found that they didn't use like flames. They like almost like microwaved it.
Yeah, like fusion. I don't know, who knows the tech that they have in this world.
Yeah. But then we go over to Maeve, and Maeve is watching Clementine, but I'll say Clementine 2 to specify for all you people.
Yeah.
And she's watching her kind of seduce a guy, and I guess it's sad for her in a sense because it is Clementine.
Yeah, it's her programming with a new paint job.
It is exactly the same person, except she looks different.
Yeah.
She uses the same speech, just different appearance. It's the exact same character. They just copied and pasted the code and the story and everything else. So I guess that's a little upsetting. And during this scene, we hear House of the Rising Sun, which I just got to mention.
Yeah.
I love how they're bringing back these like older songs and like kind of retuning them into more of a piano ballad.
Oh, it's amazing. I can't remember the other one that they play later on, too.
Yeah. And then Maeve ends up talking to Clementine. And Maeve actually flashes back to her daughter in the field. And it's pretty much just, it's just the happy memory. There's no Men in Black. There's no tragedy. It's just her reading books with her daughter and being extremely happy. But then she wakes up with Felix and Sylvester, and she's kind of concerned because she keeps getting these visions, and she specifically sees every detail. She feels like she's reliving them. So what I found interesting is that Felix says that she recalls memories perfectly. Like she is reliving them. It's not hazy like our memories. So I found that extremely interesting.
Well, yeah, that bodes well with the timeline theory.
Yeah, and it speaks to everything else that's happening in the show. Like throughout the show now, we can look at it through the lens of it is them re-experiencing a memory.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it even goes further with deja vu. Like we've seen with Dolores so many times. She relives her past experiences. And it seems like we are seeing one Dolores, or it seems like when you look at the continuity, it wouldn't line up. But really, it's explained because she is reliving that experience. Because of her memory is like so precise.
Yeah. And that's why she's in both places at once, experiencing flashbacks and flash forwards and flashbacks and flash forwards constantly. And that's why she breaks bad big time.
Yeah, and it's so dangerous because right now you have this update and Arnold kind of messing up all of these hosts. And their memory is so vivid that we'll see later in the episode, just little triggers jog their memory because their memory is so precise. It allows them to kind of break their reality and understand their previous lives and their previous experiences.
Yeah, we're even seeing it a little bit with Teddy.
Yeah, it gets crazy with Teddy. And what I find interesting is that all of these people who are kind of breaking out, they presumably seem to be first generation.
Yeah, they've been there for a while, yeah, definitely.
But then Maeve talks to Felix and Sylvester and says that she was actually asking about this girl, this daughter, but then she actually changed her mind because she realizes that every single thing in her life is made to keep her here and that it's artificial. So I think Maeve is pretty much like, fuck everyone. She doesn't want to be loyal. She lowered her loyalty, and she obviously doesn't want to be attached because her main goal is to get out. And I think that makes her extremely dangerous.
Oh, big time. I think she's a little reckless, actually, in this episode. Even though she's cold and calculating, I think she's being a little bit reckless.
No, I know. She gets a little crazy because she wants to get the explosive in her lower spine, which keeps her there, because if she leaves the park, it detonates. She wants to get that removed. And she also gives herself administrative privileges, just like Ford.
Or close to Ford. And she says that she needs an army. So I want to ask you, what is this army? I thought she just meant like... Well, it's always double meanings in these shows. So it could mean like the army that shows up later to cause a distraction. but it could also just mean a bunch of followers.
See, I think an army could be obviously anything because she can control any host.
Yeah.
However, I think she's really going to utilize sub-level B83.
Yeah.
Where we see Abernathy, where we see Clementine get put. All of these refreshed hosts. And I think it's exactly as you said it. It's an Apple refresh.
Yeah.
You have a phone, you reset it. It still works, but there's nothing there.
So she can go in and program.
It is the perfect thing that she could control.
Yeah.
They're mindless people that can fight for her.
I just don't know at this point that she knows about sub-level 83. So I think eventually she'll end up there.
I think there's a connection, though, because Clementine, her friend, was decommissioned. So I think the natural question is, where did she go?
Yeah, so she might go looking for her.
Exactly. And then that kind of spirals into, oh, I found my army. These hundreds and hundreds of hosts that have been frozen and kept here. It's like the perfect army for her.
Yeah.
So I think they have to utilize that. And I think her key to using that, I think we're later going to see, is Bernard. Hopefully. But we only have 2 episodes left, though. That's what's so crazy about it.
Crazy.
It's hard to imagine what can happen. And another thing I just quickly want to address is I remember previously we were talking about how Ford can control all these hosts. And I hate when I say things and I think I sound like an idiot. I'm like, oh, Ford probably has something in his arm. You don't need that. He has administrative privileges, so all of the hosts know that he has that administrative privilege.
Yeah.
So they listen to him.
He might have some sort of interface, though.
I don't know. Like, I think I've read in the comment section where some people say, like, oh, Maeve is a host, and that's why she can control all of these hosts, because they share that technology or whatever. So therefore, Ford must be a host. I think it literally is the same way how a host knows that, for example, a guest enters the park. They can cut them on surface, not cause any real harm. They can punch them. But subconsciously in their core code, they know that that is a guest.
Yeah.
So subconsciously in their core code, they know that Ford is has administrative approval and privileges. And I think it's the same with Maeve. I don't think there's a difference between whether they're a host or a human.
Yeah, because you got to think, like, even that scene with him and the Men in Black with Teddy at the table, the Man in Black sort of does something and Teddy reacts. There's no way Ford would have had the reaction time to command the host to do something. So he obviously has beyond administrative rights. He has God mode. You know what I mean? Like, he has full control over every single aspect of this entire thing. Even with the snake. We see him control the snake. We can control every single level of this park.
They're all coded as, this is the God.
Yeah.
Protect him and listen to him. And that's like how they're all coded to believe. So I think Ford is going to die this season.
Really?
Yes. He has to die. And I think it's going to get so bad, or somebody is going to get so far deep into consciousness where they are actually going to be able to take that next step and kill Ford.
I would love to say that I could see him dying in this season, but I don't have enough of a path beyond season 2. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what will happen. Yeah, I picture that Ex Machina moment where he's like, wow, like, I can't believe this. Like, this is fascinating. These things worked themselves out so bad that they ended up killing me.
Yeah, and from just a production standpoint, it sounds terrible, but when you're running a show, and unfortunately I think they're planning for season 2 to be in 2 years, and Anthony Hopkins is a top-notch actor who costs a lot of money, as well as he's old, doesn't warrant them wanting to commit to a long-term storyline for his character.
Yeah, but I always hate those kind of conclusions, though. This should be, if they're going to make something, they should make it full bore. Just like we always reference Harry Potter, but it's like that Dumbledore would have been in all 7 movies, but he couldn't have been. Right? So they switched it, and it ended up working out anyways. I really hope that's not the case, because we don't want to lose Anthony Hopkins. But I don't know. I want him to die at the moment that he needs to die, whether it's season 1 or season 2.
No, yeah, I totally agree. But let's go over to Dolores and William. They arrive at a beach, and Dolores feels like she's been here before, and she says she feels like she's very close to home. And they end up stumbling across a bunch of dead people. William says that the Ghost Nation probably killed them. And there's a kid that's still alive, and he wants some water. And William is very hesitant to give him the water. And William also asks him if he was one of the Confederagos who were sent to kill him. And this guy says that a new recruit, Logan, told them to come kill both of them, including Lawrence.
Yeah.
So William is a little bit upset by that, but Dolores still wants to help him. And she really doesn't want to let him die, so she goes to get water. And the man in black... Fuck. And William is not having it. We see him kneel down. He's like looking at him in the eye, all angry. The music gets all like dark. And I think this really is a good hint at William being the man in black, but I just want to throw that out there. And then we cut to Dolores, and we see her getting the water, but she ends up seeing herself dead in the water.
Yeah.
I don't know if you feel the same way I do. I feel like this is just a past experience, and it hints at the fact that we actually don't know how many times Dolores has pursued this maze, or her home, which is the first town created.
Yeah. Like how many times she's gone there and failed?
Yeah. Because it's like, how the hell does Dolores end up drowned? Well,
she probably got killed by the Ghost Nation once she gets past a certain point. Or it could be her trying to break from the other side. Right? We don't know what references. If that was her original place, then she could have died in other scenarios. And if that was like Westworld's first ride or first attraction, which I think it was, like it seems like that's where the testing ground was, and maybe that's where you entered into the park originally, then who knows how many scenarios she's been there where she's been killed and left for dead or floated upriver.
No, exactly. And then while this is happening, she hears a voice saying, "Come find me." It sounds a little bit more of like a gremlin type voice, but it's grounded in Bernard's voice to me.
Yeah, it's Bernard using his auto-tune.
Yeah, I know. To me, I hear an underlying tone of Bernard in there, which is Arnold, if you look at it that way.
Yeah, that's what made me start thinking about it, because all those times that there's an internal monologue with her, it tends to be very Bernard-esque voice telling her these things.
You know what? It fucking is Bernard, because in the current timeline, he has no interest in pursuing Dolores forward. No. So all of these things that she's hearing, like when she shoots the guy who has her in the barn, and you hear, "Kill him," that's Arnold.
Yeah.
In her mind. But it sounds like Bernard. So Bernard and Arnold are the same person. Now we confirmed it.
Confirmed. Here at BuzzTox. Confirmed.
Done.
Stay tuned, guys.
We're out. And while she's hearing this voice, she looks back, and William actually isn't there. And they're becoming less and less subtle about this switching of timelines.
Yeah. And
we talked about it.
This is for the general audience, though. People that don't look at the show this hard should now start to see that this is now where it's going.
Yeah, and I loved how they did that. Like, they were extremely subtle. Like, I had to do a breakdown in, like, episode 5 or 4, one of these, when Dolores was by the fountain. The cuts were so smart that if you just watched it without analyzing it like I did, you wouldn't find these smart cuts and the jumps between timelines.
Yeah, I remember texting you back and forth because I was looking back through the footage I had, and I was like,
yeah.
Whoa. Dude, he's not in the background of that one, man.
Yeah, I know. The girl is there. The girl is not there.
Yeah, and the girl's in a different dress in another scene. Like, it was crazy. They really tried to bury it. But I feel like the first one was like, whoa, they're laying it on thick about him being the man in the black, and then they really tried to cover the tracks as it went.
Yeah. So then, this just shows that they're switching timelines. We see William disappearing, and we're currently, for that, 5-second moment, we're seeing present-day Dolores, who is really trying to retrace her steps going back to this location. Mm-hmm. And she's really recalling her past memories with William, and she's calling out to William because she's getting confused into what timeline is which now.
Yeah. Well, she even says as such.
Yeah. But then she looks back and William is actually there again. Yeah. So she comes up with the water, and William still just looks pissed, and he looks at her and he's like, he's gone.
Yeah.
So William most definitely stabbed him, I feel like.
Yeah.
And I think he was just pissed off and annoyed at the fact that, like, how dare you try and kill Dolores, you know, you piece of shit. Wasn't feeling any sympathy.
No. He just, and also to sort of lazily accelerate the game. Because it's hard for me to believe that he thinks what she's going through is something real as opposed to a part of the game that he made it to.
I personally think that in this moment, it's his first time in the game, and I think that is truly William.
Yeah.
I don't think he's not pretending like he does outside of Westworld. He's not thinking about the game. He's thinking about this motherfucker tried to kill me and Dolores, and he was just angry, and I think he let out that anger and just snuffed him out.
Yeah,
because
but
he didn't want to help him.
But do you
he thought
think
it was a waste of time?
Do you think that through the conversations, like, he thinks Dolores is like, oh no, she's a special one? Yes, he's falling in love with her. We can see that, but I don't think he believes or knows what's actually going on with her. Like, she's not saying like, I'm breaking. I'm trying to escape this place because it's bad and I'm a slave and all this stuff. I think he is just caught up in the moment.
Yeah,
and I think near the end, or maybe even the next episode, we'll see sort of like something happen where he learns a little bit more about it.
Yeah, and it is, like, I love how they did this because to me it speaks so much to who he is as a character. He's always been kind of a hider. He hides who he is. And we get a hint at this later we'll talk about with Man in Black. You put up charities and you try and create a wall of good things that try and hide who you really are.
Yeah.
And William has always been a people pleaser. He does what he can to please other people and isn't really true to himself. And I think this action speaks to who he is. He stabs him behind the scenes to not look a certain way.
Yeah.
And he says, you know, he just died. You know, I didn't do it. He still looks like the good guy. He's still trying to hide who he really is.
Yeah.
And he does things behind Dolores' back. And I just think that's who he is as a character. But let's go over to Stubbs, Charlotte, and Ford. They're talking about Teresa's incident, and they're, you know, standing around her body. And the story is, she slipped and she fell.
Yeah.
And they say that they notified her brother. Pretty much they're talking about, you know, her situation, and everything is pretty much covered up by Bernard. And they did it so perfectly. Ford and Bernard they blame Teresa for making the woodcutter do the taking data outside of the park. Oh. And they said that, you know, Teresa tried to do it herself after the host broke his head in. And while she was doing that, she, like, slipped and fell.
Yeah.
And I loved it because Ford said it was a very disappointing end to her story. And I love how he says her story, almost referring to her as, like, one of his hosts. Like, he has complete control. Yeah. And while he said that, he gives, like, a smirk at Charlotte.
Oh, yeah.
Like the smirk of death.
Smirk of death.
I loved
his glassy, cold eyes, man.
Yeah, and I thought it was, like, brilliant because he lined up this story that she cannot possibly challenge him.
Without indicting herself.
Exactly, and I think Ford most definitely knows that Charlotte was one of the ones who had a hand in staging this thing with Clementine.
1,000%.
Yes, and he put it all on Teresa to say, oh, you know, she did all of these things, but now she's gone. Thankfully, now we can learn from it, and Bernard shouldn't be fired now because Teresa was the one behind all this whole sham.
Yeah.
So because he brought all the evidence to the table, Charlotte literally couldn't do anything except agree with Ford.
Yeah.
To not out herself and out the company.
It's crazy, man. So good. Like, for an evil plan. As evil plans go, it's fucking bulletproof.
I know. I love it. But then we go to Felix and Sylvester, and these guys are freaking the fuck out because there's an investigation going on right now. And they pretty much tell Maeve to play dumb. They say they got to stop what they're doing. They got to relax. And Maeve goes on to talk about, there's parts of her that are old. She says that inside of her, she has like a formal structure.
Yeah.
And she says it's like two minds arguing with each other.
Yeah.
Which is the bicameral mind.
Yeah. We'll call it
saying that
bicameral.
correctly?
Yeah.
We'll call it bicameral. It's probably totally pronunciated.
Yeah, I get you. I get you.
But this is how I feel about it. So what the bicameral mind is by definition is it's a divide between one part of the brain which has a speaking aspect and the second part listens and obeys.
Yes.
So what I think that means is that obviously what is happening in her mind is conflicting with what she's actually doing. And I think Ford and Arnold are the bicameral mind.
Yeah, they were. Well, there's a little bit more to the bicameral mind thing because it goes back to like anthropology, right? So the study of humans way back when, and there's a theory that, like, let's say just generally, that cavemen had this mind. So the evolution of our mind started this way, as sort of like a God's voice telling you what to do. And that's very suited to this entire series. And there's like triple meanings on all levels when it comes to this. So we have Ford being able to whisper to any of these creations that he's done to do his bidding. You have what seems like Arnold whispering to everybody, but more than anybody, Dolores. And we have now Maeve, who's sort of kind of evolved on her own without really any assistance. And we're starting to see this bicameral mind on all levels. And I think that's even the episode name of the last episode. Spoilers, but that is the name of the last episode.
No, that's a big deal. And I think Ford and Arnold almost created this bicameral mind by accident, you could say, because they have two opposing views. And the way you look at the way these hosts are operating now is that you have Arnold whispering in the heads of Dolores, of all of these different hosts, telling them to do things. But then you have Ford, which is the action, which he is controlling them by keeping them on loops and keeping them in storylines and keeping them away from the words that are being spoken to them by Arnold.
Yes.
So by definition, that is exactly what it means. It's that you have a part of your brain that is speaking to you, and then you have the other side that is listening and obeying. And Arnold is the speaking, Ford is the obeying and action. And Maeve says that these two aspects of her brain are fighting against each other. And that is Arnold and Ford fighting against each other.
Yeah, and it's also, it goes back to a classic, like, devil on your shoulder, angel on your shoulder, conscious battle of what decision you're supposed to make and stuff like that. And that plays well with Ford and Arnold's intentions. There's so many, like, that's what I mean. Like, they're going to wrap this up into a pretty little bow by the end of this season.
Yeah, it's crazy. And she continues to go on to say that there are things in me that I was designed to do, but are out of reach. And that further speaks to, she is first generation, and I feel like all of these first generation hosts are having this problem because Arnold is burying really deep code within them that pursues his own motives, but they're out of reach because of Ford's actions that he's keeping them on, these loops. So it's that bicameral mind, which is really important. And she says that they are dormant, which is like what Ford has been trying to bury, is this like core code that Arnold has implemented.
Well, maybe let me go on a little bit of a Ford tangent here, or maybe even a Ford theory. That's his storyline. He's accepted that he cannot plug this many holes, and they're all breaking because whatever he's done in the past is not working anymore. And he's created a religious storyline to bury the fact of them breaking bad, and it has I don't have this all worked out, but I have a feeling that they come to the church and he can sort of play it off like, oh yes, it is God that you're hearing in your head. Like, and this is, and then he wants to show them the difference between good and evil, and have the dominion, like we mentioned, over them, even if they were to break code.
Even they are aware of his presence. Yeah.
Yes,
it's
like
something that we
making
talked
them
about.
have morality before they leave their consciousness, making them on his side, thus giving them even more control.
Exactly. I think we talked about this a couple episodes ago. Like, it's like he knows that they are going to pursue consciousness anyway.
It's only a matter of time.
So I might as well, exactly. So I might as well implement a sense of religion so I am respected when they hit this level of consciousness.
Exactly. Or they can understand what I've done.
Yeah, and listen to me. Because it's like once they see outside of this world like Maeve, and you see all of these engineers in these fancy costumes or whatever, and we see these natives walking around with that doll, which represents that religion, which is a god that overlooks everything. It's like he's implementing that because when these hosts become self-aware and they see things like this, they have an outlet.
Yeah.
They can say, oh, this isn't just some weird event. I was visited by God.
Yeah. This is a catch-all errors in things that they might have seen, things that they're thinking about, questions they might have when something maybe flies in their face and they don't understand it. It is a catch-all, fix-all solution that he has no choice now.
Exactly. That's why it's like he says he's in pursuit of consciousness, but he likes the control. But I think, yeah, it is the pursuit of true consciousness, which means that Ford actually can't have control. So a way to have control externally is to implement a religion in which they worship you.
And he has dominion over them.
He just sits back. He just sits back and they worship him without him having to control them.
Because, yeah, he might not have that control.
Yeah, so he has a self-contained society that is then conscious.
Yes.
That he doesn't have to control and that isn't dangerous because he has controlled them with this creation of this religion.
That's so annoying because I had this theory, but I was not able to articulate it so long ago. When we first saw that church and he's like, I got an idea. And I was like, oh man, it's like he wants to create the religion for him, in a sense.
Yeah.
God damn it.
Nailed it.
Confirmed.
Here on
BuzzTox.
Heard it here first, guys. Confirmed. Moving on. So Maeve ends up telling them that she wants them to fix her. And that involves some surgery. And Felix and Sylvester step outside and try and talk about it. And Felix is a little bit concerned. Sylvester wants to knock her out and then wipe her.
Yeah.
And just destroy her.
Which is, even though he's the douchiest, is the smartest plan.
Oh, it is very smart. I don't know why they did it earlier, but Felix is so sympathetic towards Maeve.
Yeah.
But unfortunately with this scene, we get a close-up on Maeve, and to me it seemed like she was able to hear their conversation, which doesn't really surprise me.
I think she just has everything now.
Oh, she
probably
literally
read
has
lips.
everything. She's superhuman.
Yeah.
But then we go inside of Westworld, and we're with the Men in Black and Teddy, and they actually enter Wyatt's land. And the Man in Black goes on talking to Teddy and saying that he only remembers the stuff that Ford allows him to remember. And Man in Black tells him that he's meant to be the loser, which he's told him many times, which lets Teddy have a flashback, and he sees the Man in Black saying the same thing, that he is a loser in Sweetwater.
Yes.
And I think that plays back to earlier. There's many different factors here, because of the update, Arnold's code, and all of this very strong sense of memory where they don't miss a beat and it's so precise that it allows a very strong sense of deja vu.
Yeah, and Ford made the mistake of making him love Dolores, which we saw isn't the best way to do anything in this world because it breaks code. Abernathy breaks code because he loves Dolores.
Yeah. Any level of human emotion has the potential to destroy code.
Yeah, but love, being the highest level of emotion, is the most potent breaker of code.
Love. And then they end up stumbling across a group of bodies, and they find the hostess from episode 2. And the Man in Black is actually really surprised. He thought that they actually retired her. So, from the show's perspective, you wouldn't have a character say, oh, I thought they retired you, unless they kind of validated that earlier in the season. And we see, you know, Logan and William both see her in episode 2. But Logan didn't have a connection with this woman.
Yeah.
William did.
I don't know who's thinking Logan's the Man in Black still, man.
There's a lot of passionate people out there.
Man, I think they're trolling us, to be honest with you.
Well, I don't know. But William spent all of his time with this woman. She interviewed him. She took him into the preparation room.
Yeah.
And that was built that way to validate this very moment when the Man in Black said, I thought they retired you.
Plus, it's like, yeah, we've already heard him say that he's been there 1,000 times in the last 30 years and so on and so forth. But they didn't need to do it unless there was a connection. And we know that what the connection is. It's because they've had that interaction in the second episode.
Yeah, and as a TV show, you don't bring something to the fold that hasn't been established. If you are going to validate something, it has to be established in a previous episode, which they did here. It wouldn't make sense if Man in Black is just some random dude who showed up and, oh, during that time period, he also talked to the hostess. Because that wasn't validated to the audience.
Yeah.
So they did that in episode 2 with William. So it's important to build that up.
But like
as a television show you have to do.
Maybe we didn't really talk about this, but how do you feel like they're going to do this reveal then? Is it going to be this M. Night Shyamalan crescendo moment where it flashes back to all the little points that we noticed anyways?
No, I think it's going to be one of those reveals that is just going to happen, and then as a fan you have to go back and see all the little hints that hint at this being a thing. I think that we're going to see it from Dolores' point of view. I think we're going to see William from Dolores' point of view, and then we're going to snap to her in the present, and we're going to see the Man in Black in the same place approaching her. Yeah. So I think their stories are going to collide, and the Man in Black is going to find Dolores alone pursuing Arnold. But Dolores in the past is going to be with William, and there's going to be a time jump, and then we're going to see William kind of convert into the Man in Black between times.
Well, Teddy might be there.
Yeah, and it's going to be a further deja vu moment for her, and I think it'll push her more towards consciousness.
Yeah.
But then we see the Man in Black get attacked by the devil, and wait. That's a little intense. What should these things be called?
Well, someone in the comments, I really feel awful because I don't have their name right now, but someone said that particular one was like the Minotaur of the maze, which is a very important Greek. I think it's actually the Iliad that it's from, where they go into the labyrinth and there's a Minotaur, which has big ass horns. It looks like a half bull and half man that's protecting the labyrinth, which is also known as a maze. So it's very, very symbolic, but at the same time, it's just a cult member, but a heavy in video game terms.
Oh, so that's news to me. But they shoot him, they stab him, doesn't hurt him. Then the Man in Black actually ends up kind of strangling him, and that jogs Teddy's memory to remember the Man in Black kind of dragging Dolores in Sweetwater. So then Teddy ends up killing the devil thing with an axe, but then he knocks out the Man in Black because he remembered what he did to Dolores.
Yes.
Let's just move on. We'll talk about that later. Stupid Sylvester and Felix take Maeve into surgery, and Maeve ends up wishing Sylvester luck, and they end up shutting her down. And then
with their eyes open too. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, a little intimidation factor there.
She's just fucking wide-eyed.
Yeah, and then we see Felix's finger kind of hovering over the cancel button of the reformat host. So it's like he's having his doubts. And, he's really gotten himself in kind of a bind. But I think, Felix as a character, he does feel very sympathetic towards Maeve and feels like he has developed a relationship with her.
Yeah.
And I feel like, the actions that she's taken or is going to take in the future, I don't think he would have expected because she's such a charismatic lady that you wouldn't expect her to steep to a certain level.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think he's just trying to help her, but he doesn't realize that he's really fucking everything over here.
I know there was a part of me at one point where I thought that these guys are hosts too. Like every chain of command, from entry level all the way up, were hosts. But now I was just like, these guys make too many mistakes for them to be hosts.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's showing human complexity with decisions that they have to make in these scenarios. And that's why we see one that's more empathetic, where the other one's kind of cold, but he's making the more rational decision. And that's sort of contrasting what the robot wants to do.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, let's go move on to Lee, and Lee's actually building a new villain for Ford, as he thinks, for his new narrative, and it's a cannibal.
Yeah.
And as he's kind of making him go through dialogue, Charlotte walks in and is talking to him, and she pretty much says that Ford really gave you this job to keep you busy, to stay out of his way, and that Ford has almost done his narrative, and the bad guy is actually Wyatt. And she says that Ford dug up an old town on the fringes of the park.
Yeah.
So I just want to ask you, what does dig up mean to you? Like, they dug up the town. Or what do you think this town is?
Just generally, I've never really heard her say that, so I would say then that's what we're seeing. We saw only the tip of the chapel.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the tip of the chapel that they might have buried that whole town from before. The town that Dolores is in.
See, my thing is that I feel like everyone is looking at this too literally, in the sense that, oh, it must have been buried. I don't think the town was buried. I think the term dig up means that they're reintroducing it. So the town
it could mean that too.
Like the old town, which is the one where we saw the shooting in,
but
the one where all the old hosts were learning, like the first town that was ever built, it was kind of buried in the sense that it was cut off from the actual Westworld park. But what Ford is doing is reopening it for everyone else to be a part of his new storyline. That's what they mean by digging up. I don't think it should be taken literally.
But it could also mean double meaning. Like, he literally has a giant digger that's digging through canyons and old towns anyways.
Yeah. But I don't think that applies in this sense.
No, I agree then. At face value, though, I could see it could mean both things.
So let's go over to Maeve. And Sylvester and Felix were talking as she was sleeping. And she woke up like, hi! And then that freaked the fuck out of Sylvester. And we learned that Felix actually spared Maeve. And he helped her change pieces of her core code. So he's really sympathizing for Maeve.
Yeah, he's like fully on her side. But at the same time, she pumped up her intuition and confidence and aggressiveness. So
yeah.
she would have that dominance over him anyways.
Yeah. So then Maeve actually shocks Felix because she picks up a knife and slices Sylvester in the neck. But it was so precise that it wasn't enough to permanently harm him.
Yeah.
So she even tells Felix to go cauterize the wound because they might need him. But I think this move really was like, Sylvester wasn't following her before. You're damn straight he's going to be listening to her now.
Yeah, he's her bitch now. This was like this was a straight prison move on her part.
Yeah, and he's in the position now where he literally can't do anything because they fucked up so bad now that she has full admin rights. She can wake up anytime she wants. So there's no time when Sylvester is safe.
No.
So it's extremely scary.
Oh, he's dying. Like, he's dying. I still feel like we're gonna see the classic student in the office telling on the principal, like, the whole plan from the hero's perspective, and then they walk down to get them together. You know what I mean? Like, he's gonna give up the goose on her plan, but it's gonna blow up in his face anyways.
Yeah, true. But then we go into Westworld with Maeve, and we see her new abilities. She can actually manipulate the code of the hosts. She orders them around to kind of do what she wants. And then she kind of flashes back to see her child and the man in black killing her. But then while this is happening, Hector actually arrives. And he comes in, he ends up shooting up everything. She ends up helping Hector by commanding the sheriff to kind of walk away and put away his gun. And I gotta point out a really funny moment is that he put away his gun and then he waved at Armistice. And I thought that she kind of paused for a minute. And I was like, oh shit, this is like a These Violent Delights of Violent Ends moment. Like I thought he was gonna like convert her.
Yeah.
But then she just shot him.
Yeah.
So I thought that was great.
It's hilarious.
But then she gets the marshals to shoot each other. So this whole sequence was pretty much just to show her new abilities with
huge.
her new administrative abilities. That's the whole point of this scene.
Yeah, she was a conductor of a symphony of destruction.
Yeah, and she altered how it should have happened. And I thought that was really interesting. And I liked how they used a scenario that has been constant throughout the whole season.
Yeah.
But we go back to Ford and Bernard, and Ford wants Bernard to help him work on the new narrative and continue work as usual. And Bernard, as the observer, thinks that there is something troubling Ford. And Ford actually doesn't end up answering. He kind of flips the conversation. And he asks Bernard what he feels. Because Bernard is actually in such a unique position because he knows how these machines work. And he's the only true machine who understands his own nature.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting because Bernard's the only one who's like this, and he's so dangerous because he is literally the character that can alter which way the story goes.
Yeah.
Which
he's on the precipice of breaking free, but not realizing that he can. It's like the gates open in a sense, and maybe Ford realizes that now, but has his commands to call him back before Bernard runs out into the street.
Yeah, so he's like an extremely dangerous character, and if he starts becoming in touch with his past, like Teddy and Dolores and Maeve, he will definitely end up betraying Ford. And we see him already get touches of that.
Well, yeah, he hung on to the memory of Elsie.
Yeah, and at the same time, Bernard, this is a unique position with Bernard and Ford because Bernard actually is self-aware that he's a host.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very rare time where he feels like this. And I think Ford has these conversations with Bernard as a host because he finds it intriguing. But then he wipes Ford to the point where he doesn't know he's a host. He believes he is a human.
Yeah.
So in this moment that Bernard realizes he is a host, he has a lot of questions. He asks Ford, like, what's the difference between my pain and what's the difference between your pain? And if it's all in the mind. Ford goes on to say that this is the very question that consumed Arnold and ended up killing him. And Ford goes on to say that there's actually no difference, that consciousness doesn't exist because humans live in loops just as tight as the hosts do.
Yeah.
And he says that Bernard isn't missing anything at all. And that, Ford at this time, he says that he's ready to erase his memory. But Bernard quickly stops him and says, I have one more question. Did you ever make me kill anyone else before? And Ford says no. And then Bernard snaps to him killing Elsie. So I have a thought about this.
Okay.
And we've seen with Teddy, we've seen with Dolores, we've seen with Abernathy, we've seen with all these different hosts that there are certain triggers that bring back memories that have previously been erased. And that could be many factors. That's Arnold's code. That's their very precise memory. It makes it more easy for them to recall past memories because it is so clear.
Yeah.
And I think Ford and Bernard have been in this loop so often that Bernard has asked him more than once if he has had to hurt somebody because of Ford.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a constant loop where after Bernard killed Elsie, he asked Ford before he shut him down, have you made me hurt somebody else before? And Ford says no. And then he erases him. So now that happens so often, it's almost like a trigger. So what just happened is Ford refusing that he killed Elsie or killed anybody else re-triggers that memory of him doing those things.
Well, are you adverse to believing that Ford wasn't the one that told him to kill Elsie?
I think Ford might have told him to, but I don't think that would therefore be lost in his memory.
Like, here's a wild pitch, but what if Arnold told him to kill Elsie? And Arnold's not this good guy. He's just gray. And Elsie is a unfortunate casualty that needed to take place in the war against Ford. Because she flew too close to the sun.
Yeah, because she was coming onto Arnold's things too. I'm not sure. I don't know. That's a very interesting idea.
Right? She was off the grid the same way. I don't know. Because the way... fucking Sir Anthony Hopkins. He's such a good actor. That to me, when he said no, it almost seemed like he was being truthful.
Really?
To me. I could be reading him wrong because it was just a no. But then you see the scene of it. So it's implied that, well, I remember killing someone else, Mr. Anthony Hopkins. But it's just sort of meant to be put in front of that comment.
Yeah. And then that raises the question, why would he lie to him? I don't know.
Yeah, he could fucking, he would just erase it anyways.
Yeah. I like that, though. It gives different perspectives. But yeah, I always thought the reason he's like, no, he says it so often, they go through that same loop, which kind of jogs his memory to become, conscious in that sense.
Yeah.
But let's go over to William and Dolores down in Westworld. So they arrive in this town that she ends up calling home, and there's nobody in the town, but then she ends up kind of transporting herself in the past, using her memories, kind of like reliving them, like what we've learned with Maeve.
Yeah.
And we see what we saw in like a while back in the previous episodes. We see the hosts dancing in the past and kind of learning. They're very kind of robotic, it seems like.
Very rudimentary.
And Maeve is also there.
Yep.
And I just want to stress what I've been thinking is I think that all of these hosts that are causing problems, they're all first generation. Like they all have Arnold's hand in them. We have Dolores, Teddy, Maeve, Abernathy. And that's all of Arnold's work. And then you just have to explain Teddy. I don't think Teddy has truly been confirmed as an old host.
Not yet.
But what I would say, he is probably a first generation because we have seen him around for a while. We've seen him in the flashbacks, so I think there's more to Teddy.
Yeah, but what implies first generation, right? Because when did they start using the milky 3D printed versions versus the mechanical robot versions? Because I think in the timeline Williams in, they're still all mechanical versions with face peel back versions.
Yeah.
Because it's only 5 years after the fact that Arnold would have died. Whereas the milky 3D printed is the new hotness. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. But what I also find interesting is all of these characters, Dolores, Maeve, Teddy, Abernathy, like all of these people who are kind of bursting out of their code, they all are in Sweetwater, which is the safest place in the entire park. And we've seen that Ford likes to send radical hosts to Sweetwater, in a sense, to protect them, because it's the safest place. They can't go off loop, really, and they can't do anything of real harm. And I think all of these hosts had an integral role to play in Arnold's plan.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I think Teddy is the shooter in that old town that Dolores calls home.
Yeah. One of
the shooters. And I think that was his role. So I think, Ford has proven that he can't really destroy these, so I think he's storing all of these dangerous ones in.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
But then Dolores is still in the past, and she ends up talking to Lawrence's daughter. And she asks Dolores if she found everything that she's looking for. And then there ends up being shooting. People are getting shot. And we actually see a man shooting people with a rifle.
Yeah.
So I think that further hints that could be Wyatt, that could be Teddy. But then what we also see is we see Dolores put a gun to her head, almost insinuating that she could have done the shooting.
Yeah.
She could have, but I don't think that she is the only person involved. And I don't know if she was the one shooting.
Yeah, but shooting these things is no big deal. But it's like, you know what I mean? Like every day Maeve wakes up, there's two guys that shoot each other right in front of her. So the fact that they're shooting each other isn't that big of a deal. It's the fact that Dolores is seeing everybody shoot each other. And I wonder if it's like, it could even be Arnold shooting everybody. Right?
Yeah.
And he's causing something to see how far Dolores will take it. And the gun to the head, I don't know if she actually did that or it's the symbol of like what happened.
Well, I still have the same feeling with all of this stuff in the sense that the gun to the head represents complete consciousness. So what I think that represents is she completely became sentient and became fully conscious. And killing yourself, in a sense, is an escape from that. Because killing yourself isn't logical, which I've said earlier. It's not something that a host would do, but it's more of an emotional position, which is what humans actually do. It comes from a very emotional place. And I think to make that decision, you have to be extremely conscious.
Yeah, also, but well, we see it with Maeve. Maeve uses it as a different way. She uses it as a way to reset herself into the real world.
Yeah,
so it's a conscious decision to commit suicide because she knows the consequences on the other side of it.
Yeah, but that's not her killing herself for like a particular reason. Like when her daughter dies, and later in the episode we'll talk about it, she stabs herself in the neck.
Yeah.
And I believe that's because she suffered so bad, she literally broke the core code. They actually couldn't control her.
Yeah.
And I think she reached true consciousness. And what that allowed her to do is kill herself. Self-harm. Because it's like every time they hit this level, they end up killing themselves. Because it's almost too hard to take. So it's like you need to push them past that. In a sense. I'm not sure.
Yeah, or she finished doing everything she needed to do or was commanded to do by Arnold and then blows her brains out to sort of blend in with the viscera that's all around her.
No, that would make a lot of sense too.
But it's obviously a haunting image to see herself do it.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. But she actually has the gun to her head with William, and William pulls the gun away from her.
Yeah.
This must be pretty fucking crazy from William's perspective.
Well, that's what I mean.
Then you don't like me? He's like freaking out.
She's swallowing the barrel. Well, not really, but like you just see her pick up a gun and hold it to her head. That would seem really crazy out of nowhere.
I know. So, and then Dolores is like extremely confused. She doesn't know where they are or when they are. She doesn't know what timeline she's in.
Yeah.
And they're talking by that black chapel thing. And she says that she feels like she's stuck in a dream from a lifetime ago. And then she flashes back to seeing a white church in the massacre. And she says that this is what Arnold wants. And she says that Arnold wants her to remember.
Yeah.
But then William encourages her to leave, so they end up leaving. And while they're walking, Dolores says that she was very certain that Arnold would meet her at that place, but he actually ended up not meeting her there. But Logan ended up meeting them on the road. So they're fucked.
I think he even says you're so fucked, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think what I said earlier is going to happen. She's going to become, like, obedient to Logan, which is not going to go over well with William, obviously.
That's a possibility. Or
And
she
that-
may stay loyal to William. I'm not 100% sure. I don't want to commit. But anyways, Charlotte and Lee go down to sub-level 83. Just want to point out something. There's an old logo on the doors.
Yeah.
So obviously this is an old facility. It's underground, so it's obvious that it's old. Pointing out the obvious here. But, you know, I'm sticking to my same theory that this was not a place to store hosts 30 years ago or 34 years ago. It was used for something else, same like the offices.
Yeah.
But something so shitty happened that they had to bury it underground, and now they use it for all of these broken hosts. And I think the start of storing these hosts was from whatever happened 30 years ago. Could have been a rebellion, could have been, I'm not sure. We'll probably see.
I really hope this is maybe even next episode is the what happened 30 years ago moment to bury all this, to resolve what happens, and then 10 ends up being big twist and the cleanup episode.
Yeah.
Because there is obviously something major that happens for them to bury all this infrastructure down. It's not like they just upgraded. Because I feel like they would do something with this stuff. This is a full-on bury it 80 feet levels below.
Didn't touch anything. Just left.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of interest there. But they end up finding Abernathy. What are the fucking odds?
Yeah, but fuck. A win for me and you, man.
I love Abernathy.
Oh, me too.
I love him so much.
He's like my uncle. I can feel like he's my uncle.
I love the guy. But they want to put 35 years of park data in Abernathy. So finally he's going to have an important role, Trev.
Yeah.
But what if he comes back and he's just a dick?
Could be. But I
hope not.
Something will shine through. And that's why they're bringing him back.
Something will shine through.
Yeah.
Have faith.
The Disney moment will happen.
Yeah. So Charlotte expects Lee to give him a personality and a story to get him out of the park to transfer this information or take it outside of the park. And I think it's kind of funny how they end up picking the first-gen host with all this shit started with these violent delights of violent ends, and that all started with Abernathy.
Yeah.
And I find it funny because, like, I think Abernathy is the most significant host in that place, and they ended up picking him anyway.
Yeah. But either of these two morons know his significance, though.
No, I know. But, I think that we're really underestimating the importance of Abernathy. Like, Arnold used voice commands, and Arnold in a previous life was a professor, and he was heavily involved in Shakespeare. And these violent delights of violent ends kept coming across Abernathy.
Yeah.
But what's funny is that sentence is also a trigger word for consciousness.
Yeah,
so
it's
I
like
think
the call to arms.
Yeah, so he is a very important character, and I think he was a very important character to Arnold. So I find it very funny how he was given this position.
Yeah, and he's a first gen.
Yeah, and I think somebody with that kind of history who has been given a position by Arnold to pursue consciousness and give consciousness to others now has access to 35 years of information. I think something can go very wrong.
Oh, big time. But at the same time, they decommissioned him. So I wonder what sort of Abernathy we're going to get here.
Yeah, are we going to get like the nice, like, oh, Dolores, of course. Like,
yeah, no, that's gone.
Or are we, yeah, I know that's gone.
He's a fresh iPhone.
I'm trying to stay happy here.
But no, I think that will come through, though. That's what I'm trying to say, is like, no matter what they do, and then that gives hope for Clementine, where maybe there's a little bit of glimmer in her eyes when Maeve finally sees her again. So they can't wipe everything no matter what these hosts go through. There's always a little bit of residual memory.
I hope that Abernathy becomes the first true birth. And what I mean by that is he has 35 years of information, and all of these hosts are given their personalities.
Yeah.
I would love it if Abernathy was the first character to choose who he wants to be.
Yeah.
He's given all of this information, all of this data, and, he's given a certain story by Lee, a certain personality, but he ends up kind of manipulating that and kind of grows into who he is supposed to be based on the information he has. So he's completely organic and not a creation.
Well, do you think because they want to offload this in the park that they will give him the surgery to remove the charge in his spine?
Yes.
Because
possibly.
That gets him a ticket out of here.
Yeah.
Right? So we might see him and Maeve sort of in the same spot.
I think, if he's going to meet with anybody, I think it most definitely will be with Maeve.
But, there's a transition because I really feel Maeve will go down to this level in the next episode or last. Whether because she's on the lam and goes down there, or because she gets decommissioned and put down there. And Abernathy would be then in the park. So I think they will end up meeting. I just don't know how it happens.
Right. Let's go over to Bernard and Stubbs. And Ashley kind of comes up to Bernard and says, you should take a day off. You must not be feeling very good, all that stuff. And he apologizes to him for his loss. And then Bernard typically, I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you're talking about. And Ashley starts getting a little concerned because he's like, it's my job to know these things. I know you guys had a thing. I don't mean to budge in, but, I'm sorry. And that raises some questions, and then Ashley actually asks Bernard about Elsie. And Bernard just says she's probably enjoying her time off. So we leave with Stubbs or Ashley seeming very confused. So I think this is planting the seed of Ashley becoming aware.
Very suspicious.
Bernard being a host. And I think he's going to start investigating in the future. It's just up for debate whether he's going to get assassinated or not.
Yeah, I feel like he'll have an actionable death.
I think he will, yeah. Or maybe he won't die. That's the thing. Like, he'll have a fight and he'll end up surviving. I don't know. Who knows? But I
don't
think
know.
there's
He's
definitely
so fucking gun guy, ready, like happy trigger guy. So I feel like he'll have his gunfight and maybe not lose it, or maybe lose it. I mean.
Right. But yeah, let's go back into Westworld. So this hostess is with Teddy and the Man in Black, and she's talking about what Wyatt says and how the land didn't belong to the old settlers or the new. But then Teddy completes her sentence, but something left to come. And Teddy is continuing to remember his past, and he's interrogating the Man in Black. And Teddy says that he could kill him, but then the Man in Black says you can't because all of the rules in this park are keeping you from hurting me. And he says he knows how he can change them.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether he's referring to the maze and Arnold, or is referring to suffering and all this human emotion.
Yeah. I'm wondering if the Man in Black knows that this was supposed to happen with Teddy.
No idea.
Like he is a good player, but I feel like he's on uncharted territory in a sense. And then another part of me thinks that no, he knows exactly what he's doing. Like the jail scene from previous, like he knew to put himself in jail so that he could blow himself up.
Right.
Or out, I should say. But I don't know. He's so goddamn well versed in this world that he knows what to say, when to say it.
Yeah, no, I think this situation definitely caught him by surprise. But he knows that he's protected, obviously, because he can't be extremely hurt.
Yeah.
But he's just kind of riding it out. But then he actually goes into his story because Teddy asked him, and he said that he is a god. He's a philanthropist. He's a father. He's a husband. All of these things sound so great.
Yeah.
But then we get a little look at his backstory, and his wife actually took the wrong pills, and turned out that she actually hated her husband and killed herself.
Yeah.
Which is great, and that's what the daughter told him at her funeral, so he's just having a jolly life.
Yeah.
And then...
It must be pretty close.
Yeah, and then the Man in Black said that every day she said with him was like sheer terror. They were afraid that he was going to break at any moment. And he said he never hurt them. But he said that they knew who he was in the park. I wonder what that means. How do they know who he is in the park?
I wonder if it remains to be seen. Maybe they found out.
Yeah, maybe they found out. Maybe a family member, or maybe it's so obvious that he's hiding a part of himself, and he's hiding behind this facade.
Maybe Logan.
Yeah, right? So you never know.
Right.
I feel like Logan would be the prime candidate to tell his sister about all the shit that her husband did in the park.
Because he's kind of like the douchey type. But it seems like that's what I mean. That this is the hardest part for me is like, what do you get? He just ends up turning into like the worst guy ever after the first time he's in the park. Unless something really bad happens in the next episode.
No, I know. We have to see it, but then he continues to go on and says that, his wife said that all of his deeds that he did, all the good deeds and good things that he did, was just to create a wall to hide his true self from others. And I feel like that's William's arc, and that's the Man in Black's arc.
No, exactly. This is where it crosses path finally.
Yeah, he's in a world where he doesn't feel like he belongs. He pretends to be somebody he's not. And he's just spent his whole life hiding from who he feels he really is.
Yeah.
So with that, he came back into the park, and he wanted to see what he was really capable of, just to test himself. And he ended up killing Maeve and her daughter to see what he felt. And he didn't really feel anything, which shows he really has a lack of empathy, unless he really understands that subconsciously that these aren't real, so he's not really feeling anything in that sense.
Yeah.
But I find that he really wanted to test himself, because he killed a mother and a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
That's like killing his real family.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah, very symbolic.
Yeah, it's very symbolic. But then while this explanation is happening, we flash to Maeve, and Maeve decides to leave. And she picked the absolute worst time. And Clementine is trying to prevent her from leaving, which is a part of her code to try and keep hosts on track.
Yeah.
And this random host starts shooting people for fun, and that triggers the traumatic memory of Man in Black approaching Maeve and stabbing her and killing her daughter. And Maeve actually refused to die. And she slices Clementine, while in the flashback we see her slice the Man in Black.
Yeah.
And the Man in Black explains to Teddy that in this moment, he felt nothing. But at the same time, he experienced something that he's never seen before. He saw Maeve, or this host, truly alive. And that he created, that he saw her truly alive, and he saw her carry her daughter out into the field, and how like emotional that was. And she was almost operating off code.
Exactly.
Because it was so heartfelt and so emotional. And that's how he unlocked the maze. So I find it so interesting how it was true suffering. Like the worst kind of suffering that unlocked the maze. Because obviously that can crack their core code, but it's almost like in Arnold's point of view, you need true suffering because that warrants freedom.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know. Or it's like he knew that his creations were going to be treated terribly, so he wanted an escape for them. So the maze kind of appears in a sense of suffering.
Yeah, but see, I have a hard time with the maze. I'm back and forth on it, because then it's like, it seems like it's not for the Man in Black. He was literally told so that it's not really for him. But I think he's looking for it for different reasons, to sort of help these things break free. So he's playing it in a different way. So then it's like, well, then how would they attain the maze? Like, unless Arnold told them. In the case of Dolores, it seems like he did. Well, in Bernard's actor as Arnold told her about the maze. So, unless it's programmed in all first-generation hosts to pursue the maze, then, like, what is it for? So I got thinking about it. What if the maze is just a test? It's just a test. And it's to see whether or not they can follow the maze, like a lab rat in a maze, and if they make it to the end, they've passed the Turing test, or the test that tells the tester that they've made it through enough challenges and enough milestones that they are deserving or have already earned consciousness.
Yeah,
and
or
it's
like
different for everybody.
Or like in order to get to the end of the maze, you have to have achieved consciousness because of what has to be done to get there.
Yeah, and it's not like Arnold sitting in the middle of it physically. It's like the person in the middle is the person who's on the maze, and they just have all the choices in front of them.
Yeah.
So they can do whatever they want. Or I guess it would be specific to each one, because each one would have their own clues that they were on the right path, right? Suffering causes it, and once they get on the way to it, things start to show themselves along the way. And I wonder if it's a situation where Dolores sees the maze on the coffin kind of thing, or on the floor, because she's programmed to see the maze on the floor, whereas in the opposite, Bernard was programmed not to see the image of Arnold on that photo or the door that was on the wall right behind him.
Right.
So that's what I'm starting to think, is the maze isn't a physical place, but a test, like the Turing test in real life, to prove consciousness or to weed it out if it were to ever happen.
Yeah, and I'm sure it produces something that the Man in Black is looking for. He says that he's looking for a deeper game, a game that cuts deep. And pretty much that speaks to his motives in the sense that he doesn't care if he dies or not. He just wants to have an experience that has consequence, where your actions affect what actually happens to you.
But if he were to find the maze and realize, oh my God, like all these people I've killed thousands of times are actually capable of consciousness, now I actually feel bad for what I've done. So that could be it too. Because if you think about it this way, along the lines of what I'm thinking is, Maeve is already on the maze, but her maze isn't in the game. It's breaking out of the real world. She's not seeing the maze things. She's just on the path. And she's not looking for the maze like the quest inside the game. She's already on. She doesn't need the symbols to tell her she's on the right track. She's conscious enough to realize what's going on now.
Mm-hmm. But the Man in Black for me now is kind of a question mark in a sense, because I always thought that he had this kind of love for these hosts. But it seems like now he's at the point where he doesn't really have a particular love for his family or for the hosts. So he's a lot colder than I thought he was going to be.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what his arc is later in the seasons.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to see what happens with him.
But then after Maeve slices Clementine, Ashley Stubbs ends up sending people to go capture her. And during this moment, we get a flashback into Maeve after the Man in Black stabbed her and killed her daughter.
Yeah.
We see her in one of those glass rooms, and we see Bernard and Ford kind of arrive in kind of a panic. It's like a big event. And we see a look at her on one of these tablets, and it seems to be like her system, and one of them looks exactly like a maze. I don't know if that was her brain or what that was.
Yeah.
But I thought that was an interesting image with that Arnold tie-in there, which would make sense because she is a first gen, and the fact that she even is breaking her code into a conscious state in this position really hints at Bernard to begin with.
Yeah.
But they get nervous because Maeve actually isn't responding to anything at all. And Ford calms her down by playing music. And I found that extremely interesting because what's the piano in the brothel?
Exactly. It's like her lullabies.
Exactly. I think there's a lot more purpose to that piano than it just being background music for the guests to enjoy. I think one of the main reasons is to control Maeve.
Yeah. That's what I mean. He's plugging holes all over the place, and he realizes, man, these Arnold models are going to be some problem, and I can't, for whatever reason, just decommission them all.
Yeah.
Right? But that's the plot hole for me, is that he did it to Abernathy. So Abernathy would have been the one, but maybe Abernathy wasn't one that he saw as a threat. It was more Dolores than anything, and then Maeve broke bad because that happened more recently, right? The Man in Black was his age pretty much now when this happened. So this could be a quick patch.
But it's like, that's why we saw Maeve have that kind of relationship with the piano. When she started to become more sentient, she shut down the piano.
Yeah.
And I think it's because she subconsciously knows, like, it's annoying to her, but it's like she subconsciously, without being aware of it, she knows that it's controlling her in a sense.
Yeah.
And the fact that she shuts it down really shows that she's kind of shutting down control and taking control for herself. But then she's yelling please to Ford before she gets wiped, and she says that this pain is all that I have left of her.
Yeah.
Before she gets wiped, and this kind of really resonates with Bernard. And I think this is a key hint here. They're hinting at this is going to lead into Bernard becoming self-aware, out of Ford's control. we've seen that Maeve and Bernard now have a shared experience. We've seen that Bernard has kind of questioned that. That really resonated with Bernard when she said that. So I think now that Maeve is back, I think her and Bernard are going to have some kind of a moment. And I think this was put in here specifically for a reason. And I think it was put in here to run Bernard's memory and make him more self-aware.
Well, she has admin rights, so if they do get a in-the-room scene together, do you think that she will realize that Bernard's a host and try and manipulate him?
I'm not sure, but I feel like maybe
or
Bernard is so
offload
special.
the truth to Bernard.
I don't know, it'll be interesting, but maybe Bernard, he's created special too. Maybe her admin rights doesn't work on him. I'm not sure. But he is a very important host, so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But then Ford actually ends up giving Maeve a new position at Sweetwater, which is pretty much where all of the rebellious first-generation Arnold hosts are put. So I find that very interesting. But then while this is happening, he tells her that they're going to give her a new storyline. She just picks up a knife and stabs herself in the neck.
Yes.
And I think it's the same as we talked about earlier. It's like Dolores and the gun to the head. I feel like once you hit a certain level of consciousness, they can only take so much, so they end up killing themselves. It's like an emotional decision that no host could make because they are based off logic.
Mm-hmm.
And once you cross that threshold of consciousness, you're in an emotional state, in a human state, and that allows you to take your own life.
Yes, agreed.
But then we go back to the Man in Black. He's talking about the maze. He says that the maze is all there is. He wants to have choices. He wants to have meaning, and he wants to have consequence in his life, which to me is pretty ironic considering your wife killed herself and your daughter doesn't even want to be seen with you.
Yeah.
But he's still looking for that consequence. And Teddy tries to kill him, but he can't. And the hostess gets very weird here. She says that these things take time. Almost insinuating that, killing guests take time. I'm going to get meta here.
Yeah.
It's like you have to train yourself to give this person the consequence they desire. It's like the Man in Black reached the next level of the maze, but he doesn't even realize it yet.
Yeah, that's what made me... This scene was what made me think that he knew all along that this was going to happen. Like, he knew he had to sort of surrender his authority at one point in order for him to ascend to the next level.
Oh, interesting. I didn't think that. I thought it was just one giant accident. He's like, oh, fuck, I'm caught. Because Teddy wasn't supposed to remember the past. That was just random. That shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, but I think if the Man in Black wanted to break free, he could break free. So he realized, oh yeah, Teddy's got me, so I have to sort of follow along. Because he would have already... This game would have been over if I didn't allow him to do this.
Right. But then she actually offers to help Teddy. She stabs him in the shoulder and injures him. He falls onto the ground. And she tells him that he's been gone a long time and it's time to come back to the fold. So what I think about this is it's playing on a previous storyline that actually existed that Ford implemented into his new storyline.
Yeah.
And I think he left out particular details with Teddy, but informed the rest of the hosts about it. So it's like, Teddy's not aware that he was actually a part of this cult, but he was.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know, I think to me it further hints at like maybe the shooting with him and Wyatt, and I think the origin says that they were really good friends, but Wyatt got weird. I think they were both bad and they were both friends, and that was the story, but Ford left out certain details.
I wonder if I still think that Teddy might be Wyatt. And it's always been what we've said before, where the Man in Black has to kill his previous good-natured self. But this is the ultimate level of that.
Oh, I like that just as much as my thoughts, but we see a physical Wyatt, so it's like, I don't know.
We do, but he could be a henchman of Teddy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think that would be an awesome reveal if somebody called him Wyatt. or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and he just has this like Fight Club-esque reveal that he's two people.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. But then things start to get a little crazy, and these devil things come out that we're very familiar with. But then these guys with swords come out. So I don't even know. I have nothing to add to that. That's pretty fucked up. I have nothing to predict on that.
This is that Game of Thrones crossover you're hoping for.
Oh yeah, I see a dragon next episode, guys.
That would be fucking hilarious. Or you see Tyrion walk by in the background.
The worst.
The worst. But no,
But
I think that they're just culty Resident Evil 4 style villagers. You know what I mean?
I totally agree. My problem with your reaction is when I first watched it, I have vision issues. I need glasses, and I didn't wear glasses. And to me, it looked like they were literally pulled out of medieval times.
Yeah.
They looked like they had like chainmail and like a sword and all that shit. It was a huge mind screw. But it turns out that they actually weren't wearing chainmail and they aren't from the Roman times. So there we go. But I don't have anything else to add. Do you have anything else to add?
No, that's a long one for me, man. My goodness. This was a deeper episode than I thought it was going to be. I really felt this was sort of just stringing the... Not that I thought it was a bad episode, but I just thought that this was more of a story driver other than the big reveals near the end.
You thought it was more payoff.
Yeah.
But then we ended up talking about it for an hour and a half.
I think even longer than that, no?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But anyways, I'm going to end it right now. I'll see you guys later. We're going to be back with a episode 9 trailer breakdown, which I'm really excited for. You can expect that probably on the Saturday. It's going to be a little later. But that'll be fun.
Cool.
But yeah, we'll see you guys later.
See ya.